Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our class guide for the Druid for the 2024 Player's Handbook for D&D 5e.
Today we're going to be looking at the Druid and talking about its various class abilities, spells, feats, ability scores, and everything else that's going to help you get a Druid ready for your next game. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
Druids are a staple of fantasy and mythology. These wise figures of nature embody both a close kinship with animals, the natural world, the environment around them, drawing on the ancient and powerful primal magic that suffuses the fantasy worlds of Dungeons & Dragons.
Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can build and play your Druid. From the simple gardener to the person who is embracing the chaos of the elements, you might take your Druid in a number of different ways, but you may want to consider one of the following classic archetypes for your Druid.
First up is the Shapeshifter, perhaps one of the most iconic abilities for Druids: transform into a beast and attack foes with nature's fury.
You could be an elementalist where you wield air, earth, fire, and water to create powerful battlefield control effects.
Druids are also known as summoners who can conjure up animals, fae, and elementals to help them defend the wilds.
But Druids are also amazing healers, and they could be a guardian of nature who protects allies with potent buffs and healing magic.
Druids are an extraordinarily versatile class, and you can create a Druid to fill almost any role in the party, and even your character can borrow elements of each of these archetypes and still play with different types of magic and spellcasting, even if you have a particular area of focus. But choosing one of these archetypes is a great place to start if you're playing a Druid for the first time.
So let's talk about the Druid's core traits. They are full spellcasters, and they are going to be using Wisdom as their spellcasting ability, so that is going to be their primary ability. We like the wise Druids to know what they're doing when they're casting their elemental spells.
They get a D8 hit die, which is a bit tougher than sorcerers and wizards, but puts them in line with clerics and warlocks and other sort of hybrid type spellcasters that can be a little bit tougher, more robust than the squishy wizards, but still not as tough as a fighter or barbarian.
Their saving throw proficiencies are going to be intelligence and wisdom. This means that they are going to be able to shrug off some of the more deadly and debilitating control effects that target things like your mind. Druids can stand up to that, although they might have a hard time with a fireball.
Druids get to pick 2 skill proficiencies from among Arcana, Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Religion, or Survival. Combined with your high Wisdom modifier, getting proficiency in Perception and Survival, as well as Animal Handling and Insight, can mean that your Druid can be very valuable with these skills, which can be very critical in many exploration scenarios in particular. Animal Handling doesn't come up a lot, and as a Druid, you actually have a lot of magic as well that can aid you with this. And of course, you may want to have proficiency in the nature skill so that you have knowledge about the natural world. Medicine can be useful, although your healing spells, again, can make up for that as well. Druids also do get proficiency in the herbalism kit.
For weapons, they get simple weapons, so they're not going to be brandishing big swords or anything like that. And for armor training, they do have light armor and shields, so you could bring your staff and a shield to just boost that AC a little bit.
Interesting note that if you're a veteran of prior versions of Dungeons & Dragons, you may recall Druids having a restriction against wearing metal armor. That restriction actually doesn't exist in the current version of the rules. And so if you do want to put on a chain shirt with your Druid, that is light armor, and you can wear that. If you do happen to gain proficiency with medium armor or heavier armor, you could technically be a Druid wearing half plate or a breastplate or plate, and that's fine. If you get those proficiencies, you just have light armor proficiency by default.
Druids are full spellcasters, so at first level they are going to get their spellcasting feature. They begin with 2 cantrips, 4 first level spells, and 2 first level spell slots. Druids eventually gain access to 9th level spells, and Wisdom is their spellcasting ability. That means that their spell saving throw DC is going to be 8, plus their wisdom modifier plus their proficiency bonus. And their spell attack bonus is proficiency bonus plus their wisdom modifier. The Druid features table is going to show you the total number of spell slots and spells prepared you have for each level.
You regain all your spell slots on a long rest. And whenever you finish a long rest, you can change your list of prepared spells from any of the Druid spells for which you have slots. You don't have a spell book like a wizard. Druids work similar to clerics in that you can just crack open that entire Druid spell list, and if you have spell slots, you can prepare spells of that level. You get the full list available to you, and every day you can just change your mind on what spells you have prepared. This ability is part of what makes Druids so versatile, because from day to day, you can change your playstyle. If today you want to prepare all the destructive elemental spells and bring the wrath of nature, you can. And if you enjoyed that yesterday, but today you want to summon all your animal friends, you can bring all the summoning spells. And then if the next day your party's like, we are really beat up and we need some healing, you can prepare all the healing spells. Or you can do a smorgasbord of all three. I really like this because for new players, the Druid spell preparation mechanic means that if you try a spell out, you don't like it, you aren't stuck with it because you leveled up with it.
This also means that if you try an entire archetype out, you decide off the bat, hey, I want to be a summoner. And then you realize summoning isn't really for you and you'd rather be raining down the elements on your enemies. You can totally switch it up, and you can choose whatever of our archetypes works best for you every single day.
Yeah, and for experienced players, this flexibility means that you can choose the right spell for the adventure ahead. So if you really get into it and go, oh, we're going up against a white dragon, so I'm not going to bring the cold elemental spells because they're going to be resistant or immune to that. I'm not going to bring Ice Storm and Cone of Cold. I'm going to focus on maybe the summons are the better choice today, or the lightning magic is the better choice today. That way you can kind of tailor your spell selection to the adventure ahead. And because Druids have access to so much utility magic that they can gather information from nature around them, this means that you actually have the tools to give you that knowledge.
Speaking of interacting with nature, at first level, you are going to learn Druidic. You always have Speak with Animals prepared, and you know the secret Druidic language. Speak with Animals is a fun spell, and you don't always take it because, there's other spells out there, but having it is a lot of fun, and now you always have it.
Totally, and as a DM, I love it when Druids cast Speak with Animals because I love role-playing.
We recently had a whole thing with Garp the Carp.
Garp the Carp. I also enjoy role-playing squirrels. They're a lot of fun.
I like role-playing cats because I just get to be a bit of a jerk. The cats don't really care about what you want. They just want you to feed them and take care of them.
But animals see things, so it's really cool to use the spell a lot. You also get a Primal Order at first level, which lets you choose to be either a magician or a warden. If you pick magician, you get an extra druid cantrip, and you're going to add your wisdom modifier to arcana and nature checks, making you better at those skills. If you choose the warden, you get martial weapon proficiency and medium armor proficiency.
So now you can swing a sword.
Now you can.
I actually do love that they brought in this idea of, druids being warrior mages. They're maybe not as good at being a warrior mage as like a paladin, but you can have a sword or a staff that you actually hit people with and do some damage.
Yeah. And you also get an animal friend. At second level, you get your wild companion. As a magic action, you can expend a spell slot or a use of your wild shape to cast Find Familiar. This is normally a wizard-only spell, but you get it too, and it lets you summon up a little fey animal that remains until you finish a long rest.
Now for the big guns, the feature that we are all here for if we are playing a druid, and that is their second level feature, Wild Shape. So as a bonus action, you shapeshift into a beast form you have learned. You're going to begin with 4 beast forms known, and you learn up to 8 forms total. You can't choose a beast with a fly speed until 8th level. Your forms can be up to CR 1/4 at 2nd level, CR 1/2 at 4th level, and CR 1 at 8th level.
You can find stat blocks for many of these beasts at the back of the player's handbook or in the free rules, but you can also dive into the monster manual for different beast forms that you can assume. You just got to make sure that the monster that you're looking at has the creature type of beast, because there's some monsters that are out there that they look like animals, but their classification is monstrosity or fey. You can't turn into those, so make sure that you're choosing a beast stat block.
Also, when it comes to the fact that you have the 4 options to choose from that you get to pick, and then eventually you do get more, I would say that pretty simply, once you unlock the ability to fly in your form, you want a little guy, a big heavy hitter guy, a flying guy, and a swimming guy.
I think it's useful to have like a beast form for every environment, but then you can start thinking about other uses as well. It's really cool to have the giant spider in your arsenal, because then you can climb along walls and restrain enemies in webs. You might want to turn into a snake. It never helps, but it can be it can be very, very helpful to restrain your enemies as a giant snake. Or you can lead the pack as a wolf, or
I like the bear.
Yeah, be the bear. So what's cool too is that when you transform, you remain in that form for a number of hours equal to your druid level. So if you just want to go full bear mode like all day, by medium levels, pretty much you are. Note though that you get knocked out of your wild shape form if you're incapacitated or if you die, or if you use wild shape again or end the effect as a bonus action.
You can use wild shape twice and regain 1 use on a short rest, and all uses on a long rest. You gain additional uses as you gain levels, as shown in the druid table.
Also at level 5, you get Wild Resurgence, which lets you use a spell slot, even a first level spell slot, to regain a use of Wild Shape, and it costs no action to do so.
Continuing with the rules for Wild Shape, you also retain your personality and ability to speak, which I think is great. You can be a bear, but you can still talk and sing and do a whole Jungle Book thing. You gain temporary hit points equal to your druid level when you transform. Your game statistics are replaced by the beast's stat block, except you use your hit points, your hit point dice, your intelligence, your wisdom, your charisma, your class features, your languages, and your feats. Note that if you lose the temporary hit points, you aren't knocked out of your beast form. You just don't have the temporary hit points.
Yeah, you still take the damage with your own real hit points as the beast. You use your skill and saving throw proficiencies, and you use your proficiency bonus for them in addition to those of the creature. But if the beast has a higher skill bonus than you in some category, like it's proficient in stealth and has a high dexterity, you use its stats there. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, because most beasts obviously aren't going to have like a wisdom as high as yours, or usually even an intelligence or charisma as high as yours. So you keep your own, this also means that because you're keeping your own hit points, but gaining temporary hit points, even if you're turning into like what would otherwise be a very small beast.
Like you could turn into a squirrel with like 70 hit points.
Yes.
Which is great.
Yeah, which is hilarious. But here's the downside. You can't cast spells when you're wild shaped.
But here's the plus side. You can cast a spell before you wild shape that requires concentration and maintain that concentration well in your beast form.
Yes, and this is a great 1-2 punch, because shape-shifting into wild shape is a bonus action. So what you can do is drop an action-based concentration spell, maybe something juicy like Moonbeam or Entangle or Call Lightning, and then shift into your beast form in the same turn, so you're pretty much ready for action right away. When you get to 18th level, Beast Spells does remove this restriction, although there's some caveats around material components. So eventually you can cast spells in beast form, but for the vast majority of your adventuring career, you're not going to be.
Also, your gear does kind of morph into your body, or you can choose to have it fall off, or if you choose a creature that could wear your armor or carry your weapons, then it can. I usually just let it morph into me.
Yeah.
That way I don't lose my items, but you can do whatever you want.
Whether you can handle objects or interact in the environment's going to be completely based on your form. Like, if you turn into a fish, you obviously don't have hands anymore to manipulate certain objects. So, but
What about a fish with a knife?
Fish with legs. Wild shape is a big feature for druids. And what's really cool about wild shape is that your subclass is also going to give you alternate ways or enhanced ways of using wild shape too. So even if you don't want to transform into lions, tigers, and bears, or squirrels, rabbits, and birds, you'll have something interesting that you can do with your wild shape.
Now, at 4th level, you're going to get your ability score improvements, which is an option that most classes get here. You're also going to get more ability score improvements or feats at 8th level, 12th level, and 16th level, and an epic boon at 19th level.
Now, at level 7, and which is augmented again at level 15, you get Elemental Fury. You get to choose one of two options, either Potent Spellcasting, which adds your Wisdom modifier to the damage of Druid Cantrips, and then at level 15, it upgrades the range of your cantrips. If they have at least a range of 10 feet, they become 300-foot range. Or you get Primal Strike, which adds 1d8 cold, fire, or lightning or thunder damage to your weapon or beast form damage once per turn, which then at level 15 upgrades to 2d8. So this is where you can be a bit of a melee druid. If you want to use martial weapons, you can get some extra damage on your melee attacks. But what this really is good with is when you wild shape into a beast form and have a good attack there to add damage to those beast forms.
I'm picturing this druid that like drags this big sword behind them and then they transform into like a big ape or something that then has... You can punch people and smash them with your sword and do extra damage.
The capstone feature for druids is, befittingly, Archdruid, which you gain at level 20.
You get to regain a use of wild shape whenever you roll initiative and you have no uses left. So you're never going into combat without a use of your wild shape. You can convert wild shape uses into spell slots. Each use regains 2 levels worth of spells. This may only be used once per day. And a little ribbon feature here, you age 1 year for every 10 years that passes. So you get to be young forever.
I do want to point out that there's no spell level restriction for the converting wild shape into spell slots, which means that if you wanted to, you could use this to get back a 6th, 7th, or 8th level spell slot, although that's going to cost you 3 to 4 uses of your wild shape. So think carefully about that one.
No matter what build you're using, we want to take a look at the ability scores here, but I think it's the same sort of idea for all of our archetypes. The archetypes are more defined by our background because all druids are going to be primary spellcasters. And even if you're going the sort of melee combat route, your spellcasting is still going to be the primary thing that you're focusing on. And for that reason, when we look at our ability scores, we're probably not going to be investing a ton in strength.
You're going to turn into beasts that are way stronger than you.
Yeah. You yourself are not strong. The bear is strong. Be the bear. Yeah. But you still might want an okay dexterity because, fireballs happen. Dexterity is one of the most common saving throws that you have to make. Also, with light armor, your dexterity is going to impact your AC. So having a decent number here is going to be pretty valuable.
Constitution is critical for druids because your hit points carry over when you wild shape, and you're also a spellcaster, which means that you're going to be, whenever you take hits, you have to make concentration saving throws to maintain concentration on your spells. And as we're going to get into, the best druid spells are the concentration spells. And so losing concentration on them can really be detrimental, particularly because you can't cast spells when you're wild shaped. So if you're in that situation where you're in bear mode and you have a really juicy spell rolling and you lose concentration, now you have to unbear.
It's unbearable.
It is unbearable. Yeah.
It's an unbearable situation. I think that intelligence is also, it's not going to be your highest stat. It's not going to be your second or third highest, but it is worth putting a few points into intelligence, mainly because we want nature and we want to, I feel like druids are just want to be good at a lot of the intelligence checks. And there were a few abilities that brought up intelligence as well. And intelligence is one of your saving throws. But the main option that we're here for is wisdom. You want this to be your highest stat. This is where you're putting your +2 from your background. Make wisdom your highest. And you live in the woods by yourself or with a bunch of other weirdo druids, so you're not very charismatic. You don't talk to people.
You talk to animals.
You talk to animals. Animals are your friends. It's fine. Humans suck. Animals are better. Dump your charisma.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to backgrounds, though, I do think there are a few good choices depending on the archetype you're playing. I do think the farmer for tough is a great choice if you are going to be the shapeshifter, which could be focused a little bit more on melee combat and being on the front lines. Where I think that guide for magic initiate druid or sage for magic initiate wizard, these are just well-rounded for anybody.
Yeah, druids only get 2 cantrips known initially. You can get the extra cantrip from the first level feature, but having a couple extra cantrips actually helps.
Yeah.
And because there's actually surprisingly a lot of good druid cantrips, and you might want more than just the 2 initially. So Magic Initiate's not a bad pick, especially Magic Initiate Wizard if you want to grab some extra spells to throw into the mix too, because you can still cast those using your wisdom.
If you are going to be the healer, there is also the hermit background, which comes with the healer origin feat. And that's going to be perfect if you're focusing on that party role. Druids
are ever shifting and can come from a wide range of species in the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons. I think that for me, the iconic druid is often the elf, particularly the wood elf. They have the natural affinity. It's a perfect thematic match as a starting point. But I also think that dwarves and Goliaths make very compelling druids, especially in light of the types of cultures and beliefs that those peoples tend to have.
A dwarf druid might not be a representative of nature and things that grow, but they might be representative of the earth. I'm thinking of like stone singers and things like that. Like they might be just very in tune with the magic of the mountain and the stones and the earth. And Goliaths, mountains, and similar vibes with them. I also think gnomes make good and fun little druids. And for me, humans are pretty classic.
Yeah.
But I also want to throw out Druidic folklore is much more blood rituals and sacrifices, and like I love.
Depends on the culture. Depends
okay,
on where you're drawing on.
I love like Norse Viking mythology druids, and I think that orcs would go really well with like that sort of more Norse mythology. Or I mean, a dwarf could do more Norse mythology, but that's the way I like to picture my druids. I love The Northman is a great movie if you haven't seen it, and I love the depiction of druids in that film.
I think Aasimar, Dragonborn, and Tieflings are a bit of odd choices for druids, but still potentially quite potent.
Yeah,
I just feel like they all have stronger associations, I think, with clerics and paladins for some reason.
It doesn't mean you can't play against type, but just in my standard view of druids, they're almost like otherworldly more so than they are of the earth.
Yeah.
When we look at feats for the druid, depending on the archetype you're playing, the shapeshifter might want to look at speedy. This is a great mobility feature, and it's going to mean that they can get in and out much easier.
The healer might want to grab inspiring leader because it works with wisdom, or they could grab a feat to augment their spellcasting like Fey Touched.
The summoner might want to focus on warcaster and resilient constitution, although if I'm being honest, these are good picks for any druid. However, the summoner is definitely going to want to make sure that they can stick that concentration role and not lose their powerful summons. So Warcaster and Resilient Constitution are going to make sure that they almost never fail a Constitution check.
Appropriately, the Elementalist might want to grab Elemental Adept or play around with the Telekinetic feat as well.
Now we move into the big category of spells, starting with Druid Cantrips. Here, there's some damage dealing options and some utility options. For damage dealing, you might want to look at Produce Flame, Shillelagh, Starry Wisp, or Thorn Whip. If you are going to be beating people with a stick, Shillelagh is the best way to go, but Starry Wisp and Thorn Whip are both incredible. Thorn Whip also has some control tactics with it.
You pull enemies close to you, which can be really, really handy when combined with so many Druid spells, because you can use it to pull enemies into the damaging element of effects. Yeah.
And Starry Wisp is just a great damage dealing cantrip and a great choice if you're just looking to blast people.
Druidcraft, Elementalism, and Guidance are great for utility. I would absolutely pick up Guidance for the skill boost for your entire party as well.
Looking at first level spells, universally all druids are going to want to look at Entangle and Fairy Fire. I think these are just two of the best first level spells.
They're iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you might want, if you're a healer, you might want to look at Goodberry and Healing Word.
The Elementalist will do really well with Ice Knife and Thunderwave.
For second level spells, universally, you may want to consider Barkskin and Pass Without Trace. Pass Without Trace is one of the best sort of sneaking stealth mission.
Buff,
If you have a druid in the party with a rogue, or, the great thing about Pass Without Trace is even if you're not part of the crew that's sneaking, you have that darn paladin that keeps ruining your stealth rolls. Pass Without Trace is going to help them actually make those rolls.
Barkskin is also a great buff to just set someone's AC to 17 for an hour, and it doesn't ask for your concentration either. As a summoner, you finally got your first real summon spell. Summon Beast! Summon up an animal friend. Whereas the Shapeshifter might want to call down Moonbeam, and the Elementalist has lots of cool choices here in the form of Flaming Sphere, Heat Metal, and Spike Growth.
The healer may want to look at Aid, Enhanceability, and Lesser Restoration. I think Aid is a must-have.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are all great choices for spells, depending on the type of play you want to do.
Yeah, Spike Growth for the Elementalist is one of those first ones where that combines well with Thorn Whip of put down the Spike Growth, pull somebody into it for lots of damage. At third level, the Shapeshifter, also the Summoner, might want to grab Conjure Animals. This is just great for the Shapeshifter because it really feels like you're summoning the pack.
You get to turn into a wolf and summon a bunch of wolves or whatever.
Whereas the Summoner's going to love summon Fae in particular.
I think the Elementalist will want to focus on Call Lightning and Sleet Storm. They're both just excellent. I love Call Lightning. I think it's just a fun spell.
It's also fun for any druid.
I mean, yeah.
Really. Aura of Vitality is an amazing healing spell, especially when used out of combat. And Dispel Magic is a great insurance to pack along if you're a healer too.
The Shapeshifter, when we get to fourth level, might want to focus on some more conjuring spells that also work for the Summoner. But the thing that we're looking at for the Shapeshifter is getting a concentration spell down that can create a damaging area, and then you just knock people around with your big bare hands.
Yeah.
So Conjure Woodland Beings, Conjure Minor Elemental, and Fount of Moonlight are going to be great choices for the Shapeshifter.
Yeah, Conjure Minor Elementals and Fount of Moonlight are both going to buff the damage that you do with your beast form attacks. So this is where you're really going to want to turn into a beast that has multiple attacks, because these spells increase your damage, and they're going to stack with those earlier Nature's Fury features as well to let you hit really hard.
For the Elementalist, you will want to look at Control Water, Ice Storm, and Wall of Fire.
Fire and Ice.
Yeah, actually, you got your fire and water and ice.
Yeah.
I think Control Water is a great utility spell, and I've actually saved a few lives with that spell. And Wall of Fire and Ice Storm are just damage-dealing monsters.
The Summoner has great choices here in the form of Giant Insect and Summon Elemental, whereas the Healer might want to instead turn a wounded and an ally into a animal with Polymorph.
Yeah, it gives them some temporary hit points that they can then use, which is almost like healing, but you also get to turn them into something maybe a little more powerful than they are.
As we move on to 5th level spells, the Summoner may want to befriend an animal and simply awaken it with intelligence, or Conjure Elementals is another good pick for them here at this level.
For Shapeshifters, you may want to look at Insect Plague. Again, we're throwing out a bunch of insects and then turning into... There's no insect beasts.
Oh, there's things like giant scorpions.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, Insect Plague to summon a horde of scorpions, and then you turn into a giant scorpion.
That would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
For elementalists, you have Cone of Cold and Contagion. I think Contagion is a really fun spell.
Yeah. And the healer has Greater Restoration and Reincarnate. As we move into the 6th level spells, the Summoner, you've got Conjure Fey here, and the Elementalist, you've tried all the elements, but how about the Fury of the Sun in the form of Sunbeam?
Yeah, and for shapeshifters, you have Wall of Thorns, and for healers, you have Hero's Feast.
As well as the amazing heal spell.
Makes sense.
I think Hero's Feast is another must-have for any druid. You can stack the bonus hit points of Aid and Hero's Feast together, and your party members are going to love you.
And if you took Inspiring Leader, you can add that into the mix as well and use all 3 to really bolster your party.
Now, as we get into the very high-level spells for druids, things become a little bit more universal, in that there's not a lot of high-level druid spells, so this is kind of more of a pick-your-favorite situation as we get into the 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells. I think the first one that I'm going to bring up, Reverse Gravity, is a crazy spell. If it's just unreal and it has an insane effect on the battle, try it. It's fun.
You may also want to consider Firestorm, which is a great pickup for Elementalists, but honestly great for anybody, and Regenerate for healers. All 3 of these spells are just good pickups no matter what archetype you're playing, and they're very powerful. Yeah. I would go with Reverse Gravity personally, always.
Yeah. And if Reversing Gravity didn't make you feel like you were in control of the fundamental forces of nature at 8th level, how about just controlling the weather, causing earthquakes, summoning up incendiary clouds, scorching your enemies with a sunburst, or just calling up a tsunami? However you want to destroy the world or bring the wrath of nature's destruction on civilizations, go for it.
And at 9th level, Foresight, Shape Change, and True Resurrection, I feel, are all iconic druid choices, so pick your favorite.
So as we get into the subclasses for the druid, the first up that we can take a look at is the Circle of the Land. This is a really strong pick for the elementalist, because the Circle of the Land gives you your Circle of the Land spells, which is a bonus list of spells that you have added to your spells prepared, that you can change based on whether you're choosing arid, polar, temperate, or tropical. And you don't have to be in that environment to choose that environment. So if you're going into a polar, if you are going into a polar environment, you can bring the arid energy and fireball all the white dragons while you're there.
It is really cool that I do imagine the druid taking on the form and some elements of the land that they are representing that day, and so you change it every long rest. At 6th level, land druids have natural recovery, which is an ability that's going to grant you additional spell slots. So out of all the druids, this is sort of the most spellcasty druid.
Absolutely. And it also incentivizes you to use your wild shape in a different way, because you can actually use your wild shape to do damage to your enemies and heal an ally at the same time, or conjure up a copse of spectral trees which can protect your allies and grant them the resistance that you gain from your land association.
Moving on to the Circle of the Moon, this is the prime pick for the Shapeshifter, and that's because they get a bunch of bonuses that actually help their wild shape. They can wild shape into a beast with a CR equal to 1/3 their druid level, so they're actually going to be well above the other druids for the type of beast that they can wild shape into. And they get temp HP equal to 3 times their druid level, plus an AC 13 plus their wisdom mod when they're wild shaped. So they are getting way more temporary hit points, can turn into way better beasts, and they get a better AC when they do so.
Furthermore, they get a list of spells that include Cure Wounds, Moonbeam, Conjure Animals, Fount of Moonlight, and Mass Cure Wounds. They always have these prepared, and you can actually cast these spells in beast form, which is great, especially because you can use Cure Wounds to heal yourself or allies. You can bring down your Moonbeam or your Conjure Animals to deal damage with you, or Fount of Moonlight is a great damage buff for yourself. It's kind of like the greatest hits of spells that you like having in wild shape while you're wild shaped. The forms improve even further, because when you're wild shaped, you deal radiant damage with your beast form attacks. You add your wisdom modifier to your con saves. You eventually get the ability to teleport as well. And you get uh, more damage added onto your wild shape as well. So if you kind of want to turn into a beast and beat your foes up with radiant empowered attacks, you want to be a moon bear.
The moon bear.
The moon bear.
I love the moon bear.
The moon bear. You really, the Circle of the Moon is amazing. It's my favorite Druid subclass. It's a great option for really getting the most out of wild shape.
Next, we come to the Circle of the Sea. And the Circle of the Sea is, of course, very water-themed, calling the Wrath of Water. And we all know that water can be pretty wrathful, but it can also be calm and chill. Let's take a look at what they get.
The Circle of the Sea is all about the storm, I think.
It's the stormy sea. It's not the calm sea. You're not.
This is not your healer choice, I think. This is for your.
This is the elementalist.
Yeah.
So call the wrath of the ocean upon your foes. You get your expanded spell list, which includes things like Fog Cloud, Gust of Wind. You have Ray of Frost, Thunder Wave, Lightning Bolt, and useful things like Water Breathing and Control Water. You also get Hold Monster and Ice Storm and Conjure Elementals. So there's some great choices in this spell list.
Yeah, and you're gonna get an alternate use of your wild shape, which is really, really cool. It starts out that basically it creates this emanation of the Wrath of the Sea around you that as a bonus action, you can use it to damage enemies and push them back when they're close to you, which as a spellcaster, you don't like it when enemies come up to you. So
it's your personal space wave.
Yeah.
You send out a wave being like, get out of my personal space.
But what's cool about this ability is that it gets better as you level up. Eventually, when you activate it, you get a fly speed, in addition to the swim speed that the subclass gives you, and resistances to cold, lightning, and thunder damage. And eventually you can share this form with an ally, either giving it to an ally or having both you and an ally have it at the same time. So if you want to fly above the stormy seas, raining down lightning upon your foes, you should play the Circle of the Sea.
So we have the land, the moon, the sea, and we finish it off with the stars. The Circle of the Stars offers great options here for both elementalists and healers. They're one of my favorite Druid subclasses. Let's see what they get.
So you get a star map. Your fun map, as long as you've got it, you have Guidance and Guiding Bolt prepared. Guiding Bolt is normally a cleric spell, but you get it and you can cast it without a spell slot to throw radiant damage down.
At third level, you're going to get your starry form, which you get to kind of turn into a constellation, or a constellation appears on you, or however you want to envision your starry form. And you actually get to choose one of three options, either the archer, the chalice, or the dragon. One is going to give you more damage potential, one is going to give you more healing potential, and one is going to make you more robust. And these actually get better as you level up, allowing you to do even more damage, even more healing, or gain a flying speed.
Yeah, and eventually whenever you are in the starry form, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. You also get this really cool Cosmic Omen ability that can be used to add d6 to d20 rolls or subtract d6 to d20 rolls, including saving throws of enemies and boosting those of allies if you wanted to. But it depends on whether you roll evens or odds for that day, whether you are giving out buffs or giving out penalties.
One of my favorite abilities, though, that the Circle of the Stars gets is their starry form at first. When you take it on, that's just your form for the time period. But at higher levels, you actually get to choose which starry form you are embodying at the beginning of every turn. So that means that if you plan to cast a healing spell this turn, you can take the chalice, and then you plan to blast the next turn, you can switch over to the archer. So you can change your constellation and flow like the nebulous galaxies.
So when it comes to role-playing your druids, here's a couple questions you can consider when thinking of your backstory and personality. First of all, what connects your character to nature? What animals, environments, or elements do you have a particular affinity towards?
Do you have an animal companion or a familiar? I think that animal companions make a lot of sense, and even though you have the option of having Find Familiar or the option of taking Summon Beast, I like to imagine that if I do have an animal companion, when I use these features or spells, that's me kind of bringing that animal companion to the forefront to actually do something in combat. I think that you can roleplay having an animal companion with you at all times, but only by using your magic can you get them to participate in combat.
I also think that it's important for druids to think about what I think of are like the kind of the archetypal 3 Bs of nature. And that is seeing the beauty of nature, the balance of nature, but also the brutality of nature. And depending on your druid's outlook on life and adventuring and the world, maybe even their alignment, maybe one of these things resonates with your druid more strongly. Maybe your druid really cares about the beauty of nature and sees it as a sacred place that must be protected, and that must flourish and that supports and nourishes people. Maybe your druid is a little bit more about the balance of nature and sees the cycles that nature goes through, sees the ways in which life and death are always existing in kind of this natural cycle, the changing of the seasons, the ways in which things all work together in nature. Or maybe your druid looks at it from a much more cynical perspective and looks at the kind of the uncaring brutality of nature, of that kind of that thought of like the law of the jungle, or only the strong survive, or really that kind of take of nature that is kind of callous and cruel and unfeeling, and that doesn't really care about who lives and who dies. So all those ideas can exist in a druid and really depend on whether you have that kind of that beautiful nature or that wrathful nature.
And with that wrathful nature and your views on nature and all of that, also, what are your views on civilization? Is it counterintuitive to the laws of nature? Or do you think that civilization is a part of nature? How do you feel about technology or arcane magic? I often think of one of my favorite movies of all time, Princess Mononoke, where there is the city of iron and steel and industry versus the elements of nature and the nature spirits, and they're at war with each other. But it could go the other way as well. There could be a view of civilization where it is from nature and humans are part of nature. And so how does your druid feel about that?
How did your druid learn your druidic magic and abilities? Did you join a druid circle, learn from a mentor, or perhaps you were guided by an elemental or fey spirit? I love the druid background of like the child who is lost in nature and befriends animals or a fey spirit or an elemental, and that those things help them learn how to survive and learn how to tap into the magic around them.
Do you follow a specific deity, or do you have more spiritual beliefs? There's a lot of gods out there that personify nature and the elements, and perhaps you take your magic, much like a cleric or paladin, from your worship of that deity, but there might just be inherent magic in nature that you draw from naturally.
Are there rituals or rites that you perform to show your reverence for nature?
Do you have any flaws, fears, or vices? Even though you're a wonderful druid of the woods, perhaps you have many flaws in your depiction of how you handle civilized areas. Perhaps you're not very good at socializing with people. Perhaps you speak your mind too often. There's a lot of options here for the gruff, wild person living in the woods who then has to, be a part of a party or take their beliefs and their rituals and all of that into an adventure.
I think one of the fun archetypes to play with here is the sort of the naivety of the social structures of cities and civilization and people who live in them, right? Like viewing everything as, not thinking that manners are important, because you just eat like an animal and get into it, and like knife and fork, what are those?
Toss them aside. Finish your drink. Another classic Thor. Yeah. And also, how did you meet your adventuring companion? Since you are maybe either a member of a secluded druid circle or you are just a hermit in the woods, something has drawn you to adventure with the group that you're adventuring with. Perhaps an imbalance in nature has brought you to civilization where you are looking for people to join in your quest of fixing the imbalance. There's a lot of options here, but it's good to think about how you became part of the group that you are now part of.
So that's been our guide to the Druids in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for the 2024 rules.
I hope that this video gave you a lot of ideas for how to build an exciting Druid. I think Druids are such a fun and excellent class in D&D, and they are just dripping with themes and flavors that you can really personify when you bring it to the table. If you enjoyed this video, if you have some cool ideas for your Druid, let us know about it in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you found this guide useful and want to help out the channel, follow the links below to get on our Patreon.
And if you want to see us living in a world where nature is slowly being absolutely destroyed, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we got plenty more class guides for the new 2024 PHB right up over here.
Please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time
in the dungeon.